morning. Rise in freedom. I'm Austin Peterson. You're watching and listening to the Wake Up America show at wakeupAmericaShow.com. Glad to have you here. It's Wednesday, October the 18th, 2023. How are you feeling today? Good. Well, if you're tuning in right now live, do us a favor, would you? Click that like button and subscribe to the channel if it's your first time here. We'd be glad to have you come back and join us here and make some friends on the Wake Up America show. We stream this show live every Monday through Friday from 7 to 9 a.m. Central Time. From Monday through Friday, 7 to 9. Yes, okay. Already said that, Austin. All right. It's been a hell of a couple of weeks there since the war in the Middle East broke out, and all I can do is hope that we don't end up in World War III. But when you see the absolute state of the commander-in-chief, Joe Biden, heading to Israel, and, well, you can pretty much guess what he sounds like while he's over there.
America is a nation that can be defined in a single word. I was going to put him...
Pretty much. We'll get there in just a moment. But at the top of the show, let's talk about some things closer to home. First off, bosses in the United States have a big problem. Workers are actually taking their sick days. Oh, yeah, terrible, right? We're going to talk about that and how bosses are just flummoxed, that employers are actually making use of the benefits that they didn't used to use at all. It's kind of like an insurance policy, and they hope you never use it, right? Well, we're going to talk about that this morning at the top of the hour. And then after that, it's getting too expensive to have fun. The price of concert tickets and tickets to Walt Disney World or Disneyland here in the country are just out of reach for the average American. We'll talk about that while our politicians, of course, are trying to shove billions of dollars more into not only the war in the Middle East, but the continuing ongoing conflict in Ukraine and Russia. We'll talk about that this morning here. At 7:30 a.m. Central, we're going to speak to Ian Howarth of Turning Point USA, a young Jewish British American, to talk about whether or not Harvard students should be punished for speech. And just to go ahead and throw my opinion there into the mix, my column this week at humanevents.com is going to be on this topic, and the title of the column is Punish Harvard Students for Their Speech. I make the case, the opposite case that some libertarians have argued, saying that, and including people like Vivek Ramaswamy, who have said that they should not be punished or blackballed for their speech. Well, whether or not that should be true or shouldn't be true, it appears that many of these law firms have rescinded offers that were on the table for many of those Harvard students after they penned a letter in support of Hamas after the attacks on Israel. So we're going to talk about that, and I'll give you my explanation too as well, why I think those students should be punished for free speech, and we'll go for their speech, and we'll go back to harken back to 2016, back when I had to teach Gary Johnson about Nazi cakes. Everybody remember that one? Those were the good old days. Yeah, we remember old Nazi cakes, Gary Gay. We'll talk to Ian Howarth about things like that at 7:30 a.m. this morning. At 8 o'clock this morning, Judge Andrew Napolitano is going to come on here, and he's going to take the opposite tack from me on the Israeli-Hamas conflict. And I want to talk to him a little bit about the isolationist foreign policy that has returned to the GOP. Yes, I said isolationism. There is a difference between isolationism, non-interventionism, and interventionism. So we'll talk about that with Judge Andrew Napolitano this morning at 8 a.m. At 8:23, friendship is currency, and Generation Z is going broke. Turns out a lot of young people these days don't have actual friends IRL. What's IRL? Well, I love being explaining these slang terms to my lovely wife because I am perpetually online and she is so not. But IRL means in real life. Now, for those of you who are watching us streaming this morning on rumble.com, you probably know what that is, right? IRL streamers. You ever heard of this? So we're gonna talk about that this morning. Why Generation Z doesn't have friends, and should be fun. At 8:30 this morning, we're going to talk about girl measuring is the new viral trend. Have you seen this? Do you know what girl measuring is? Well, if you don't know what girl measuring is, people have been talking about girl math online, how girls do math. And then now we're going to talk about girl measuring, which is how girls measure. And, well, you can expect it's about what you think it is. At 8:49 this morning, we're going to end the show on a lighter note because these topics are just so dark sometimes. And honestly, I just prefer to keep things a little bit light sometimes when everybody is looking at the news and getting depressed and reading propaganda and seeing the hate-filled expletives that are flying around online. We're going to end the show with a nice little upbeat note, and that way you guys are going to be able to have a nice day. And I'm going to explain to you why I think that this nun may have violated the nap, but you know what? Sometimes righteous violence in the name of the Lord can sometimes be a good thing. I'll explain to you and show you a clip, an unbelievable clip of a nun in an altercation later on in the show at the end of the day, and we'll have a good show. We'll finish it off there. But before we get to the topic that I want to start the show with, we probably ought to hit the big news of the day, which is Joe Biden in Israel. And well, he sounds about as well as you would expect. Let's take a listen to our illustrious commander-in-chief, the leader of the free world, ladies and gentlemen, in Israel today.
You know, years ago, I asked the Secretary of State when he and I were working in the Senate to write something for him, and he said, he wrote a line that I think is appropriate. He said, it's not, we lead, not just, well, I won't go into it. I'll wait later. Taking too much time.
Oh, Jesus. What on God's green earth is he trying to say?
But the point is this, that I was deeply saddened and outraged by the explosion at the hospital in Gaza yesterday. And based on what I've seen, it appears as though it was done by the other team, not you.
What?
But there's a lot of people out there not sure. So we've got to overcome a lot of things. But the point is,
oh my God, we are so screwed. This is a nightmare. We're heading into World War III, and the commander-in-chief is asleep at the clock. It's just unbelievable. Good morning. If you're just tuning into the Wake Up America show, I'm your host, Austin Peterson. I'm glad to have you here. As you file in, do us a favor and smash that like button as you're heading in and making your way to your seat. And as you're sitting down in the theater with your nice little popcorn, or I guess it's breakfast time, so your eggs and your bacon, and you're enjoying the show, and you're saying to yourself, I'd like to see this again. Don't forget to click that subscribe to the channel that you're watching us on this morning so you can come back and join us again tomorrow morning. We work very hard to bring you not only the best content, the best clips, the best news, but also the best guests. And we work so hard to give you the absolute best guests that you can get in the morning to find out what's going on in the world. And I tell you what, the Wake Up America show doesn't buy into the propaganda that the MSM spews. And we also don't feed you any alternative news bullshit either, because let me just tell you, Austin Peterson and the Wake Up America show blazes our own trail. We listen to both sides and we make our decision based on the best facts that we have between us. And sometimes, especially when it comes to the Israel-Hamas hospital bombing story, sometimes before we blurt out our opinion on something, or before we report on something in the news, we actually don't say anything. You know why? Because I tell you what, it reminds me of an old quote. I used to work at the Fox Business Network, and my old boss was a guy by the name of Roger Ailes. If you don't know him, look him up. Great man. Roger Ailes had a quote that he spread out to the whole news organization. He says that it's better to be late and correct than first and wrong. Many mainstream organizations now are very stealthily editing their headlines when they immediately bought into the Hamas propaganda that Israel bombed this hospital in Gaza. And now they're going out and they're editing their headlines without saying anything, because they just immediately believed it when the Palestinian Hamas stated that the Israelis bombed this hospital. I don't know who did it for sure. It could have been either side, but I'll tell you what I didn't do. I didn't immediately believe them when they said that. I don't immediately believe both sides either way, right? I have a preference in this conflict. Absolutely. I believe one side is morally superior to the other, but that doesn't mean that I immediately believe everything that every side says in a conflict, because as we all know, the first casualty in war is the truth. But we're going to talk about that plenty today. And can we please talk about some things that are a little bit closer to home? At least something that really definitely personally affects you. Not to say that the Middle East conflict doesn't affect you. It certainly does to an extent. But let's talk a little bit about something closer to home that I think I found interesting in the Wall Street Journal. Bosses have a problem is the headline. People are actually using sick days. Yeah, bosses are like,
oh God! No, God, please, no!
Younger employees are calling in sick more often than they used to, and some employers say it's costing them money. So the bar for taking a sick day is getting lower, and some bosses say that's a problem. U.S. workers have long viewed an unwillingness to take sick days as a badge of honor. That's a laurel that workers care much less about these days. What about you? Have you been taking more sick days than usual in the last few years? There's no such thing as a sick day when you work for yourself like me, but I will say that the pandemic really opened up my eyes to the necessity for taking sick days. And of course, it's not just about COVID-19, although that is part of it, right? But we have seen a rise in RSV cases, and that can require days away. Respiratory viruses, those can require days away from work. Managers and HR execs are attributing the jump to a bigger shift in the way that many Americans relate to their jobs, which honestly I think is a good thing. I'm not some dirty commie, but I do think that work life balance is important. And honestly, before the pandemic, I think it was this kind of work till you die mentality. And as somebody who was raised in a Protestant work ethic, I do think that work is overall good for us, and not necessarily not if it's for no purpose, right? Not like the Keynesians believe it. We should pay people to dig ditches and fill them back up again. But I digress. Workers are using up sick time more often for reasons like mental health, right? And unlike older workers who usually were pretty loath to call in sick for fear of seeming weak or unreliable, younger workers feel more entitled to take full advantage of the benefits that they've been given. And, that confidence has actually really grown as record low unemployment has been persisting. 30% of white collar workers with access to paid leave have taken sick time this year. That's up from 21% in 2019. So that's quite a big jump. Employees between 25 and 34 years old are taking sick days the most often. Some employers complain that worker absences are driving up costs. The Detroit car maker Stellantis has been bringing up the issues in contract talks with the United Auto Workers, saying it's lost 10.9% of hourly worker time because of unplanned absenteeism. But I really think this story that the Wall Street Journal about Darren Smith is a really good example of what we're talking about here. He tells a story to the Wall Street Journal that before the pandemic, he would muscle through any illness that he had. Well, that's definitely how I was, right? If I was sick, I still would go in, right? I would let my coworkers know that I was sick, right? So I could have a studio to myself, thankfully, when I was working back in radio. But, especially when I worked at Fox Business, it was like you didn't matter if you were sick, you got your ass into work because that's just the corporate grind, right? That you want to climb the corporate ladder, you got it, you sick, you don't care, you just got to get into work and it doesn't matter, right? But Darren Smith, at one point, he was his 50-year-old project manager. One day he fell asleep at work because he was on medication for a shattered ankle, and he woke up to keyboard indentations on his face. And then in 2020, he got laid off. And he says that was his epiphany. He says, I gave you everything and then you kicked me to the street. On a recent Monday, after working a few hours, Smith sent his boss a message to ask if he could take a half day sick. His boss gave permission and he walked out. He says, it was a gorgeous day. I just wasn't in the mood to work. You know what? You've got sick days. You've got that time. If your employer is offering that to you, I don't see anything wrong with taking that. And that's aspiring to be the boss, right? I'm someone who aspires to be a boss and to have employees and to grow this business so that we've got people working here for me. But if I offer them sick days and if I offer them benefits, you know what? I'm looking at that differently now than I might have looked at it before the pandemic. I would say kudos to the young people. They're the ones leading the way on this one because look, I'll tell you, as somebody who's worked in the corporate world, these bosses do not give a rip about you. They don't care. They will throw you to the curb. You are just a number to them, right? Younger workers used to follow the example of older peers. They used to come in when they were under the weather, right? But that is starting to change. Workers in their 20s and 30s, they would used to take 1 or 2 sick days a year. Now it's more like 3 to 5. And the accounting team is not happy about this. They say it's a liability because the extra cost of ensuring staffing, but then don't offer the sick days, right? Don't offer the time off if you don't and then suffer the consequences of it. But we cannot continue to see rising productivity and lowering wages and wages remaining stagnant. It is an unfortunate impact, unfortunately, of inflation that workers are going to have to be able to be paid more to keep up with it. And yes, I understand the impact that that has continuing to feed into inflation. But of course, you can't expand the money supply by 30% and then not expect that people aren't going to do what's necessary in order to be able to keep up. And if they're not getting paid to keep, if their wages aren't keeping up with inflation, and they have those sick days, maybe they're going to need an extra day off to work on their side hustle so they can bring in extra income, right? It's unfortunate that we're in this kind of economy and that people have to do that, but I'm not going to I'm not going to take it away from people. When you have record suicides, specifically amongst the male population here in the United States, and you got men who are self-deleting. If a man says, you know what, I need a half day for a mental health checkup, or I've got to go take a sick day for whatever reason to go out there and clear my head. You know what? I think we probably got to do it, right? There's going to have to be concessions that are made. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this subject, though. Send us a text at 573-319-1586. BIPOC doing racism. He's actually been one of my new favorite Twitter account follows. He says in the Rumble chat, companies don't care about you and won't be at your funeral. Exactly. Thank you. Use all your benefits. Absolutely. Work to live. Don't live to work. Agreed. Il America says there was a video of a guy saying he was a great employee who do overtime and then work for his days off for comp. For the comp, he then needed a little time off when his dad was dying. They said no. He said bye. Well, good for him. Floby Tenderson, hilarious name. Toby Flenderson, we know that's you, Toby. 36 here. I only took 1 day for sickness ever. Every other PTO sick day was used for fun stuff, like fishing the spawn. Well, that's fun. There you go. Corey and Callie says, I work for a family owned, though. My wife works for super corporate Costco. People get a scam FMLA for a doc and then abuse it whenever they please. Well, you shouldn't scam your employers, but I do think that you ought to be able to take advantage of the benefits that are there if they're offered to you, right? So I like the idea of employees looking after their health. I think Americans, we've got to take care of ourselves. We got to take care of our mental health. And like you said, you work to live. You don't live to work. There's no reason for us to go into a death spiral like Japan has and put themselves in a productivity spiral and such listen, it all feeds into itself. Work hard, play hard. If you're going to be a hard worker, you need to ensure that you take time off. Even like the way that I like to do it and structure my time off is, yes, I'll take vacations during the year. Some people don't do that. But I do try and, with my wife, try and take at least one vacation a year, at least, or maybe like 2 small trips a year, something to get away, get out of the environment. I don't think staycations can be helpful, I think, for your mental health and to kind of help clear your head. But I don't really think that they have the same impact as like getting into new scenery, getting away from your environment, getting, fresh air, country air, getting outside somewhere where you can kind of like see things differently and get a different perspective. I really think that that kind of helps a little bit more than staycations. I'm not knocking them, but that's just for me. But I also just think that if you're going to do things for your mental health, taking a sick day and going outside and getting a little bit of exercise would be good for us. We don't want to end up in a situation where it's like Japan, where their birth rate is dropping and they're dying. A key indicator of a sick culture is alcoholism. And if you look at Japan and Russia, for example, one of the ways that you can tell that their culture is sick is how much they drink. And that's actually a big one in Russia, where they actually they cover up their rates of alcoholism, but they are drinking vodka like it's going out of business because they are so unhappy with their lot in life. And Japan is the same way. I talked about this story, I think, a couple of weeks ago, where they every single night during the week you have to drink with your bosses, and they have this whole culture of the employees have to pour the alcohol for the bosses, and they stay up until like they don't get home until like 11 o'clock at night, and then they have to get up and go to work the next day, and then they go back out to the bars after work. And this is like, you have your work day and your structured work day, and then you immediately have to go out with your boss and start drinking. Well, more and more people are doing in the United States what we call quiet quitting, which is not slacking at your job, but doing your job and then not volunteering for things like employee fun days or, employee happy hours and all that kind of stuff. And, when I was a younger guy in New York and DC, I would do things like that. I kind of enjoyed like, employee happy hours or those kinds of events because it was new and it was fresh. But then I just realized it was just another way to kind of like get people to talk about work and to sort of like do work projects to an extent and work networking. And you aren't really having that much fun. Plus, you don't want to be drunk around these people and talking to them about work or about your personal life. And then you have personal dalliances that occur. So as I started to get older, right, and I'm 42 years old now, when I was working in, nonprofit institutions, which are a little bit different, culture wise, but still have some of the same similar impact when they have these same events and things like that. I realized that no, actually, my time outside of work is mine, and that's valuable time. And you know what? I've never been seen, and this has probably been to my professional detriment, but I don't care. I've never been seen as a team player. I don't think anybody's surprised about that. I'm a rabid individualist, and maybe I'm a little bit selfish, but I don't see it that way because value. I have probably the best mental health, and you can ask my therapist wife about this. I'm not just trying to brag or anything like that, but I probably have one of like the coolest, calmest demeanors personally, and like no worries, Bob Marley, smoke a blunt by the beach, everything gonna be all right, right? Like attitudes, casual, laid back attitudes in my personal life because I don't sweat the small stuff. I don't worry about things that I can't change. Right there, sometimes I do get stressed, right, and I have a little bit of trouble sleeping because of stress, and that's just normal and that's natural. But for the most part, I don't let the intrusive thoughts win as much as possible, right? And I try and ensure that I take a little bit of time each day to do something for myself that makes me feel better or that calms me down. This week, I got a brand new, beautiful Swiss K38 military surplus rifle. Yes, thank you. 1931 beautiful Swiss K31 rifle came in, and last night I took a little bit of time, probably around an hour right before dinner, right after all the work was done, and I sat down with I had my little headset on, with like the goggles where you can like see the magnification and stuff, so I could see all the beautiful markings, right, in the steel that was worked in, and see all the little intricacies of the wood. And I sat down with my gun oil, my Remington gun oil, and my Q-tips, right, and I've got my little rubber gloves and things like that, and I'm lovingly taking apart all of the mechanics of this beautiful machined gun that was made at a time of conflict. And I thought about the people who owned it, and I went away into my own little world. And then when it was all done, it sat there underneath the light, solitary, sitting there beautifully as it is, as a work of art, a machined work of art, and it sits there to today. This morning I'll go home and I'll look at it again, something that I'm proud in. So to have this little project, right, to have a hobby that takes you away and gives you something to think about and consider and to ponder. And I'm listening to podcasts and lectures as I'm doing it, and I'm playing clips of like Opie and Anthony from back in the day, and my wife is making dinner and she's listening to the clips and laughing and coming in and talking to me about it, sharing those moments, right, doing those things for your mental health that are selfish, taking this time for yourself. I encourage it. I advocate for it. I think it's a good thing for us to do. And I know that a lot of employers are upset about it, but I got to say, I think this is the right way to go, right? KVND90 says, Did you get that? Did you get that at the gun show over the weekend? No, actually. But I did get a bayonet for my M1 Garand at the gun show, and I got actually the K31 from did you know that Royal Tiger Imports had a bunch of K31s? They were $400. Oh my God, yes. The guy that I picked it up from the FFL dealer when I went to go fill out the form that you have to fill out from get permission from the feds, right? Or else. Right. So when I went to go fill out the form, the guy that I did the gun transfer through to get my K31 was like so jealous when he saw my K31 because it was in such good shape. And we all know anybody who knows like gun transfers knows Royal Tiger Imports is kind of like a little iffy, but I got a really good one and it was $400.
How dare you?
Yeah, that's what he said. He saw mine. He's like, I saw those. He's like, I was thinking about getting one, and I was like, yeah, I think, yeah, boy. I think I got like the very last one for like $400. So yeah. If you're just tuning into the Wake Up America show, good morning. Glad to have you here. Joni Rankin says gardening is her happy place, as well as this show. Well, we're thankful to have you here, Joni. And if you're glad to be here, make sure you click that like button and subscribe to the channel. We'll be glad to have you come back and join us here Monday through Friday from 7 a.m. to 9 a.m. Central Time. That's every Monday through Friday, 7 a.m. to 9 a.m. Central Time. Well, we're going to talk to Ian Howarth here in just a couple of minutes. But I like this clip from U.S. Senator Ted Cruz talking about that hospital bombing story, and this is what he accused the mainstream media of.
CNN is Hamas's Air Force. MSNBC is Hamas's Air Force. ABC is Hamas's Air Force. Now, that may seem like hyperbole to you. That may seem like exaggeration. On this week's podcast, we walk through the evidence. We go through example after example after example of the corrupt corporate media repeating Hamas's propaganda, repeating their lies, actively undermining Israel. And we explain how the corrupt corporate media doing so is an integral part of Hamas's war plan. It is how they hope to destroy Israel. They are counting on CNN and MSNBC and ABC, NBC, CBS, all of them.
A lot of these news agencies that were reporting on that Hamas hospital bombing, a lot of these news agencies have been stealthily editing the headlines on them because they immediately believed the Hamas propaganda that Israel bombed the hospital. And so now they're changing their headlines. Anyways, we're going to talk about that with Ian Howarth when we get back. Plus, we're going to talk to him about the Harvard students who wrote that letter. Does he, as a young person, does he think that people should be punished for speech? I do. We're going to talk about that with Ian Howarth, Turning Point USA, and we got some more controversial shit. Well, you do not want to miss it. We'll be right back on the Wake Up America show at wakeupAmericaShow.com. Snow Goose Lodge in Jamestown, Kansas, your home away from home. Choose the comfort and privacy of our individual rooms, each equipped with its very own locking door and en-suite facilities. Or bring the whole family and make memories in our communal space. Snuggle up on our plush recliners or share a meal around the dining table that comfortably seats 8. Our kitchen is armed with everything you need, from a microwave to a full-size fridge. For a bird's eye view, book the Eagle's Nest. Enjoy the privacy, storage space, and its very own toilet and shower. For just $450 a night, reserve the entire lodge. Perfect for reunions or retreats, accommodating up to 8 guests. And remember, Snow Goose Lodge is a haven for kids and dogs alike. So bring the whole family. Book your stay now and get 20% off your first booking using the code WAKEUP. It was 1946. A battle was fought, not overseas, but right here on American soil. The Battle of Athens. An intense struggle against election fraud and for the rights promised by our founding fathers. Driven by the Second Amendment, ordinary citizens stood tall and fought back. Help us expose this momentous battle of integrity and bravery. Your support can make a difference. Visit givesendgo.com/bleedamerican and pledge your support, because we believe in the power of truth, the strength of unity, and the spirit of we the people. Let us not forget, we bleed American.
Fire. Hello, this is Barack Obama, and let me tell you why Austin Peterson stinks, and you should never pay attention to anything that he has to say. First of all, he's a libertarian, and we all know libertarians are idiots. They don't realize how important government is to everything that we do. I recently became aware that Austin has opened up a libertarian shop at apeforlibertyshop.com. Now, I'm asking you as a personal favor to me that you never ever visit apeforlibertyshop.com. With all of the great Liberty merchandise there, the last thing that we need to do is to get people spreading this message around the country, because then they might start thinking that they don't need government. And that's the last thing that good Democrats like us want. So if you love democracy, like me, and hate freedom, then don't visit AP for Liberty Shop. Like I said, whatever you do, do not visit aporlibertyshop.com. I'm Barack Obama, and I approve this message.
When I was in foster care, I never knew when I would have to move, so I always had my suitcase ready to go. Then one day, I was adopted. My new parents opened their hearts and home to me. My parents cook my favorite breakfast for me every morning. My parents take me on trips I never thought I would go on. They gave me a home and an even better reason to use that suitcase. My parents aren't perfect, but they're perfect for me.
I would remind you that extremism in the defense of liberty is no vice.
It is better to settle these matters in the courts than on the streets, and new laws are needed at every level. But law alone cannot make men see right.
Good morning, Rise and Freedom. I'm Austin Peterson. You're watching and listening to the Wake Up America show at wakeupamericashow.com. Glad to have you here. Click that like button and subscribe to the channel. If you've enjoyed the content that you've been hearing so far this morning, we'd love to have you come back and join us every Monday through Friday from 7 a.m. to 9 a.m. Central Time. All right, well, the news has been pretty bleak over the last week. I was just talking to our next guest a little bit about both of us and the difficulty that it is that we have in separating our personal lives and the reality that working in the news media, these things have an impact on us. And I'd be lying if I didn't tell you that I've definitely lost some sleep with horrific images of the conflict in the Middle East. Well, President Biden has decided to visit the war zone as he headed to Israel the last 24 hours, which honestly doesn't make me feel any better, especially with the clip that we played earlier of him being completely incoherent. Is this the man that we've elected to be the leader of the free world and to settle this conflict? I think we're in dire straits, ladies and gentlemen, and corporate media certainly has not been our friends in this. Corporate media rushed to blame Israel for an explosion at a Gaza hospital Tuesday based solely on the claims that were made by the terrorist organization Hamas. CNN, Reuters, the Associated Press, they immediately took the word of Hamas and framed the bombing of the Baptist hospital as Israel's responsibility, despite IDF pinning responsibility on the Palestinian Islamic Jihad. Now, despite unconfirmed reports about the culprit for the bombing, corporate media immediately reported in its headlines that an Israeli airstrike caused the bombing without any evidence beyond the claims of Hamas. And then they've had to start editing their headlines. I don't know why anybody watches that trash. They should only watch the Wake Up America show anyway. Joining us now to discuss is Ian Howarth. He's a young Brit turned American and a Jewish intellectual who's joining us this morning. Good morning, Ian. We're glad to have you here today.
And thanks so much for having me.
Ian, it's your first time that you've joined us on the show since this conflict broke out. Would you like to share your thoughts on what's happening in the Middle East and how this is affecting you personally?
Yeah, I think a lot of Jewish people and a lot of non-Jewish people are really struggling right now. I think one, just the scale of the evil and the violence that we're seeing images and videos of not only Israeli citizens coming in, but Palestinian citizens too being harmed. I think if you care about life, which most people in the West claim to do, then it's obviously just horrific to watch innocent people either being targeted or caught up in the crossfire and being used as human shields by Hamas, an evil terrorist organization that is getting propaganda help from the mainstream media, as you said. And so it's pretty distressing to see those things, let alone the response we're seeing in the West, like seeing people chanting in the streets to gas the Jews, to see people celebrating the murder, rape, mutilation, burning alive of civilians, and to see it accepted in the halls of academia, to see various mainstream media outlets like MSNBC run really quite absurd cover for this, to see people who are elected to Congress, namely Ilhan Omar, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Rashida Tlaib, and others defending this. We're in pretty dark times, just as the West generally. And so I think we're at a crossroads, and I'm pretty worried about it.
One little bright spot I can share with you this morning. I was reading the news that in Florida, where there is quite a large Jewish population in the United States, the gun shops are reportedly saying that the guns are flying off the shelves.
I wonder why.
As Jewish Americans have started to exercise their Second Amendment rights, which is definitely a good thing because, of course, there are threats to Americans that are being made here domestically. I saw a thread on 4chan a couple of days ago, or it came in yesterday or the day before, that was attacking me for my views on this conflict, and it said that the reason why I was taking this view, some random anonymous person was saying the only reason I'm taking these views is because of my Jewish wife, which I thought was fascinating, that some anonymous person had taken the time not only to get to know my political views, but also to find out that I had a Jewish wife, and then pin the Star of David on my head as if this was, I had to wear the yellow star. I have to wear the yellow star along with everyone else just because my political opinions are those that I do not support acts of terrorism, and I support, advanced, civilized civilizations over barbaric savages who commit crimes and acts of terrorism against helpless and defenseless children. I'd like to know your thoughts specifically on how the corporate media responded by immediately publishing headlines that claim that Israel was responsible for the attack without even checking to see if that story was correct. What is your thought on the corporate media and how they're covering this?
I mean, this is nothing but an anti-Semitic blood libel. Like, I do not throw the accusation of anti-Semitism around. I think you've known me long enough to know that, I tend to stay away from the identity politics of it. I don't like just to cry racism and bigotry like the left do in every situation. But it's very, very hard to not apply that label in this case, because they have taken the word of the very same people who are butchering civilians, chopping people's heads off, raping them in the street, dragging children back to be kidnapped. Those are the people who are reporting this. And it's one thing to say this has happened, like an explosion at a hospital has happened. I have no problem with that being reported. I have no problem with reporting that people have been hurt. The fact that people have been hurt is terrible. But just taking like 500, 600, 700 as the report of the Gaza Health Ministry, which is a propaganda wing of Hamas, and just like throwing that out as fact is just absurd. It's laughably absurd. It's like reporting on World War II and then having the Nazi Health Ministry telling you something that the Americans did and just reporting it as fact. And when you have the media taking every single thing that Israel says and putting it through this misinformation veil, you have AOC coming out and saying there's a lot of misinformation out there, wink, wink on one side, not the other. And that's fine. We should view everything that the media puts out with some skepticism. But when there's zero skepticism for the side that are committing terrorist atrocities, then I think that really shows what side the media is on. And all the damage is done in the immediacy. It doesn't matter that they slowly retract, slowly change their headlines, because we've seen people protest over this. We've seen people, so-called Palestinian journalists, coming out and saying that Israel are committing a genocide by targeting hospitals. None of it's true. And at the very least, we don't know that it's true. But based on the information we have, it's very likely untrue. It's a modern-day blood libel. It's exactly the same as Rashida Tlaib putting out tweets that Israelis murdered a Palestinian child and threw him in a well. Turned out not to be true. But the damage is done. It doesn't matter when you retract.
used to be that the American right largely was, I wouldn't say was in lockstep with, in solidarity with Israel and the Jewish people, but you would say that largely the conservative right were supportive of Israel, some of them for their Christian views, some of them for their views of Israel being a democracy in the Middle East, and some for other reasons, right? Ayn Rand, for example, is her arguments in favor of Israel versus the Palestinians were convincing on myself, someone who's not religious at all. And personally, Ian, I'm not a religious person, and I take a fairly dim view of organized religion in general. That doesn't mean that I don't pick sides. However, I actually happen to prefer Judaism out of all three of the Abrahamic religions because, well, Jews are mostly largely secular.
We
There's
also
no
have the best food.
the best food. Well, Jews have probably some of the better food. It is a little bit. I do like the Mediterranean food. I do like I do like myself some hummus. But I will say this that out of all of three of the Abrahamic religions, I like Islam the least because, of course, they're the ones who are the least enlightened. At least when I mean enlightenment, I mean the actual enlightenment. That their ideas are the least liberal, if you will, and that's why I tend to prefer the Jews. Although, again, I take a dim view of all three Abrahamic religions, the same way I look at Scientology or anything else. I hope that doesn't offend you, but it's just my personal point of view. A photograph that was being shared around the other day caught my attention. I'm going to pull this picture up on the screen so my listeners can see this here. Excuse me. There's a young influencer who works, she's a representative for Turning Point USA. Her name's Morgan Ariel. An attractive young lady, Christian activist, she says, a lioness for Jesus Christ, and a truth seeker, she says, fashion designer, all that. And she posts a picture of Christianity in America, good doggy, showing the Israeli flag with what is supposed to be an American Christian being led around like a dog. This is a representative for Turning Point USA, so the Charlie Kirk group. How do you react when you see something like that?
Yeah, I think something like this is just indicative of the simping, clickbait, attention whoring we see going on social media, frankly. I think she is one of several people who intentionally just put out incendiary stuff, winking at the anti-Semitic element of the right because it gets a lot of clicks. That's why you see people like Lauren Chen sucking up to someone like Nick Fuentes, gets a lot of clicks. I don't think this is necessarily about values. It's certainly not Christian, and it's deeply anti-Semitic, and that really is the point. I don't know if she can really connect the dots on this. I don't really know if she can necessarily read the tweet she's putting out. I don't particularly care. I think it's just indicative of what social media has become. I know that it's not representative of Turning Point USA. I don't really know what TPUSA rep means. I'm a speaker with TPUSA, and I've never encountered anti-Semitism. I know they've done a lot of work to actually counter the anti-Semitism that is on the right. They do a lot of work that's pro-Israel, a lot of work that's pro-Jewish. And so one of her many titles,
like a Jewish event for a young Jewish,
Young Jewish Leadership Summit just a few months ago in Los Angeles. So I think the idea that this is indicative of Turning Point is just not true. I think it's just one of her many titles that she adds to make it seem like she's actually adding anything of any value to the world. But looking beyond what she's doing, which is, again, just attention whoring online, it's just indicative of this really underbelly of social media where there is a lot of anti-Semitism out there. I mean, I think you've seen it just coming out in support of Israel. Also, have you noticed, we're always told this is about Israel, but the anti-Semites really come out whenever you mention Israel. Like, if we're just talking about Israel and not Judaism, and this has nothing to do with anti-Semitism, why are people always saying, oh, you're a Jew, or oh, you've got a Jewish wife? What does that have to do anything if we're not talking about Jews? And so I think there really is an underbelly in the conservative right as well when it comes to anti-Semitism that a lot of people aren't acknowledging enough. And I think it needs to be dealt with. And there's also a lot of money to be made, because when clicks make you money, it's a very easy handle to churn just to get attention, especially when you have a character like her who doesn't actually have anything of value to add.
I mean, the thing is, and like, I hate to get too much into a theological discussion here, but I mean, there's always been a lot of tension between the three Abrahamic religions, right? There's at least on behalf of Islam, they're kind of like the little brother of the other two major religions in a sense, right? So there's a lot of, I feel like there's a lot of inferiority complexes, right, amongst the followers and practitioners of Islam, largely because, you know, if you're not the to more widely spread. And in terms of numbers, of course, there are, like a billion Muslims, if you will. But I feel like there is such an inferiority complex from the Palestinian Muslims to Israel because, of course, they're not as powerful a civilization. But we also see amongst American Christians that aren't pro-Israel, because of course many fundamentalists are, at least with a sort of a reversion to a more anti-Semitic view amongst many American Christians. We see things like, the Jews killed Christ, for example, which of course is wrong, because if you've been thinking about the Roman Empire, you remember it was the Romans who killed Christ and Jesus was a Jew. But we have seen more of a rise of anti-Semitic Christianity, at least on the right, with the rise of the Groypers and with right-wing populists. Have you noticed it as well?
Yeah, I think for several years. I mean, just the rise of Nick Fuentes, the rise of several other characters who parrot that kind of thing. But again, I think it's almost a chicken and an egg situation, where I think anti-Semitism is always there, certainly in the West. But if you just look at the history of Judaism, there's always been varying degrees of anti-Semitism for many reasons, but it's certainly been a central pillar of many Western societies. So I think it's always there. And I think it's the deepest, most insidious conspiracy theory there is. And conspiracy theories are a very good way to build your audience. If you look at some of the biggest names on the alt-right or the non-mainstream right, they peddle conspiracy theories endlessly because it's entertaining, it's interesting, it gives you a sense of community, it makes you think that you're somehow elevated, you see the world in a different way. Anti-Semitism is the ultimate conspiracy theory. And so it's a very good way of like reeling people in.
The Masonic Jews. I mean, that was like, I used to have this statement as like, not all conspiracy theorists are Nazis, but all Nazis are conspiracy theorists, right? For example, Adolf Hitler's conspiracy from World War I is that the Jews stabbed Germany in the back, and that's why we have to kill the Jews, because they're the reason why we lost in World War I, right? And, their hatred for Jewish Marxists was the same as their hatred for Jewish capitalists. And that's why you see so many of these Groypers, for example, despise libertarians, because we are so pro-capitalist. And of course, many of us, like myself, are very secular. It's an interesting time to be alive with the rise of National Socialism again and the rise of anti-Semitism. This conflict that broke out in the Middle East couldn't be worse timing. But one last question here on the topic that I initially sent to you. Thank you for rolling with these punches. Was the question of these Harvard students who penned this open letter ostensibly in support of Hamas, like immediately after these terror attacks. And Vivek Ramaswamy, who I agree with on a lot, I find myself in vehement disagreement with him when he says that these students should not be punished for their speech. And I'll finish setting this up for you, and then I'm going to let you go and rant for a moment on this. Maybe you'll disagree with me on this. But I think these students should be punished for their speech, because I've always maintained, even when it was not in my favor, when I was arguing that social media platforms had a right to ban people like myself or Nick Fuentes or Alex Jones or whoever it is, right, that they had the property rights to do it. I didn't think they should do it, for example, because I defend people on the right more broadly than I do people on the left. And that's just, a political strategy of mine. But I think these students should be punished for their speech, because nobody has a right to go and work for somebody else. I believe in freedom of association. I defended the Christian baker to not be forced to bake the gay wedding cake, but I said we should have a boycott, and I would set up the biggest, most homosexual cake shop next door to compete against them, because that's according to my values. I supported Bud Light and the boycott against them. Not that I would have drank that swill anyway. But I wonder if you agree with me, or do you think that, like Vivek, these are just young students, they're idiots, they shouldn't be blackballed, and we should just let bygones be bygones? Where do you fall on this one, Ian?
Oh, yeah, I agree with you completely. I think I'm not a fan of Vivek Ramaswamy. I think he's a charlatan who says whatever is needed to whatever audience is in front of him. He's changed his position on almost everything. Having worked in tech, he reminds me of the tech sales guy. He's very energetic. He's very engaging. Seems like a nice guy. He's fun. He's got that grin on, waves his hand around. But if you actually listen to what he says for more than 5 minutes or Google what he says, it's almost constant lies or constant flip-flopping. I think this is a case of just contrarianism, which I think is a very good and effective way, especially on social media, to get attention. You see it all the time when most people are on one side of an argument. in this case, students protesting in favor of terrorism, everyone thinks that's bad. If you live in the West and you value Western ideals, then celebrating the rape, beheading, mutilation, burning alive of civilians is bad. We can all agree on that. And these are adults doing it. And so I think it's a very good way for him to insert himself into the conversation and get the attention, because attention doesn't matter if it's positive or negative. And so I don't believe that he actually thinks these people are good people. I don't think he would hire them for any of his companies. But it's just a way of getting attention. And then you've seen other conservative figures coming out and arguing over this. When we talk about cancel culture, because that's what this is coming down to, the idea that this is cancel culture, we should all agree that there is some line between acceptable and unacceptable behavior. No one with a brain stem is arguing that there are no standards for society. You can't batter your baby to death in the street and then go work at a children's school the next day, right? Like, no one would make that argument. And so there is a line. The argument is, where does that line fall? And also, for whom does that line fall? These are adults in levels of high education calling for the murder, the mass mutilation, the torture, the rape, the burning alive of Jews. That is not acceptable. Oops, I watched the wrong YouTube video and now I have a slightly misaligned view of the world. That's not, oops, I joined the Communist Party on campus and I have some silly views of economics. This is calling for mass murder. To be an adult in the United States includes the idea that murder is wrong. And so the idea that any of these people defending these students would hire any of them is laughable. They wouldn't do that. And also, many of the people defending these students are the same people who humiliate students on campus when the social media cameras are on, or they try and cancel random celebrities for things they tweeted 10 years ago. So all of this is, I think, just performance for attention. No one believes that these students are worth defending. Everyone with any kind of conscience believes that what these students are doing is wrong. It's all for, again, social media attention whoring. And so I think Vivek Ramaswamy just found a way to insert himself into this narrative, make it all about him. It's great politically, but morally, not so much.
Well, what I find fascinating too is this is kind of like the class argument on this one. Is I looked up his position on the cancel culture when it came to Bud Light, and he was vociferously in support of conservatives boycotting Bud Light. So he was in favor of that cancel culture, but he didn't say anything about all of the blue collar people who were going to lose their jobs for that. But he's an Ivy Leaguer himself, right? He went to Ivy League college himself, and then he goes and he defends his own class of people from that same cancel culture that he vindictively used against people like ourselves of the middle class, if you will, right? I don't know. Maybe you're a really, really rich guy, and I don't know, but I'm not.
Hey, I'm Jewish. What do you know?
Yeah, exactly.
I think with this, I think the class thing is an important point. I think a lot of it, though, is also this idea of there's a level of almost academic elitism where if you're in the college world, you're allowed just to do and say whatever you want. I think that's the biggest problem with some of the younger generations right now, is that nothing matters. Nothing is real. Yeah. You can do anything. There's no consequences. And putting statements out there and signing to a statement, signing to an ideological view is a statement of intent. And these have real life consequences. It's not like saying, oh, I believe we should tax the rich. It's like, okay, but you are supporting, again, the murder of a religious group. That has real life consequences, not just in the Middle East, but in the United States. We're seeing Jews being attacked. We're seeing Jews being murdered in places like France. These have real life consequences. You need to work.
When they said gas the Jews, they were like, like gas them up, like make them laugh. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It's just, it's crazy. Like real words have real consequences.
Yeah, absolutely. Ian, I got to run. Where can people find you online?
Yeah, you can find my show Off Limits. You can find that on YouTube. You can also follow me all social media, IGHAWORTH.
Thank you very much, Ian. Have a wonderful day and stay safe out there. Thank you.
Thanks, Austin.
You and several other of your colleagues released a statement calling for a ceasefire in the region. But I wonder, what is Israel supposed to do about Hamas after they murdered, brutalized, abducted over 1,000 of their citizens? Are they supposed to just do nothing?
Well, I think what's important to note about a ceasefire is that it's not one-sided. Hamas has been sending thousands of rockets into Israel as well. And what is important is for us to identify our goal in terms of what safety means, in terms of what defense means.
But and if I may, Congresswoman, I think the position from Israel's perspective is that there was already an attack. And Hamas already committed an attack. After that happened, do you really believe that they should not respond to that?
I think what is important in terms of response is Israel does have a right to self-defense. I think what we need to take a
You can just tell that she does not want to
look at in this situation is if collective punishment qualifies as defense, if the blockade on water, food, electricity, if the dropping of white phosphorus, which is an indiscriminate weapon, qualifies. So I do believe that there's a discussion to be had here. I don't believe that an either or approach is what is necessary, but we should identify what our goal is, which is the cooling of tensions in the region.
Israel's goal is to rid the region of Hamas. They've been very clear about that. And I certainly take what you're saying about the condition of Gaza right now for civilians who, as you point out, are not synonymous with Hamas. But for Israel to deal with Hamas, which is a force that is actually detrimental to Palestinians.
Absolutely.
How else are they supposed to address a violent, militant, some say terrorist group,
Questions.
other than to go in there,
right,
and take them on directly?
Well,
Good
you know, when we talk about going in there, I think we should also keep in mind President Biden's statements as well about what the implications of a potential ground invasion would be. This is an inherently complex situation. I do believe that Hamas needs to be dealt with.
But how, I think, is what I'm
and
trying
I
to understand.
think what we're trying to figure out right now is that this present situation of collective punishment and indiscriminate attack is one approach, but we are seeing the issues and the complications with that approach now. Can we target them in terms of intelligence? Is there precision? What are the options available? Are an entire
It is a whole lot of word salad. All right, well, let's hear from Judge Andrew Napolitano on this one. His point of view might be a little different than the one we heard from Ian Howarth, but we respect all people's opinions on the show. Come on, hear what you have to say. Don't forget you can send in your opinion, too, if you text the show at 573-319-1586. We'll be right back. Don't go away on the Wake Up America Show at wakeupAmericaShow.com.
Good morning to the Cantina crew. This is Elon Musk, the CEO of Twitter. And I just want to say thank you for watching the Wake Up America show. I've decided that Austin Peterson will be the new CEO of Twitter.com, effective immediately. First thing to do, though, is I've got to go and blast off into space.
If there wasn't going to be somebody who was a fiery champion of liberty, somebody who would get out there and who would be aggressive, and if they wouldn't do it with more fire or passion than I had, then I would go and I would fight this battle for us. I've fought for the principles that we all share. Parties tend to be secondary to me. We're here because we believe in the principles of liberty. I am not a perfect messenger, but I think I'm a damn good one. This is a replica of our first president's flintlock pistol. You have my full support, my respect, and my gun.
I think that at the heart of my philosophy is much more libertarianism than well, that's the fashionable word these days, I guess. A conservative is no longer just that. He's a libertarian and always has been.
Yet any time you and I question the schemes of the do-gooders, we're denounced as being against their humanitarian goals. They say we're always against things, we're never for anything.
What is fascism? Fascism is private ownership, private enterprise, but total government control and regulation.
Well, the trouble with our liberal friends is not that they're ignorant. It's just that they know so much that isn't so. If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. This is the issue of this election. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
The conservative, so-called, is the one that says less government, get off my back, get out of my pocket, and let me have more control of my own destiny.
Would happen if I had to pick up the phone, call 911 for one of my family members or one of my neighbors? What would I do if no one was on the other end to respond? What if there was no 911? You can be a part of the solution.
Anybody can be a firefighter. Male, female, younger, older.
We have school teachers. We have leaders in business.
Is me, you, anyone that wants to be.
There is no typical firefighter.
Do you hate the deep state? Do you reject the Antichrist in all his ways? Do you believe that aliens controlled LBJ to assassinate John F. Kennedy? Did you know that the shot can put chemicals in you that will make you more sensitive to 5G? Do you love America? Do you want more freedom? Do you like smoking hot red-headed libertarians? Then the AP for Liberty shop is for you! Check out all the awesome new merch and have a happy new year! Fight the deep state, reject the Antichrist! Visit AP for Liberty shop and get your patriotic merchandise now, or the deep state wins!
Good morning, Rise and Freedom. I'm Austin Peterson, and you're watching and listening to the Wake Up America show at wakeupAmericaShow.com. Click that like button and subscribe to the channel if you enjoy the content that you've been hearing so far this morning. We'd be glad to have you come back and join us every Monday through Friday from 7 a.m. to 9 a.m. Central Time. All right, well, let's get this show on the road. And in the conflict between Israel and Hamas, I'd like to take a look at things closer to home. How is domestic policy affected by that? And can we compare some American political movements from history to what's happening in the Republican Party to today? Joining us now to discuss this is the host of the Judging Freedom podcast, which you can download on any of your mobile devices. And his weekly column at judgenap.com is a must-read for those who care about economic freedom and personal liberty. My personal friend, one of the leading libertarians in the world, Judge Andrew Napolitano, joining us right now live. Good morning, Judge.
Good morning, Austin. Pleasure to be with you, my friend. Thank you again for the generous introduction.
Yeah, glad to have you here. Before we get to your column, Judge, and the contents and discussion of the Middle East conflict, like on that micro level, I'd like to bring it back here to the United States and take a look at how this conflict impacts American foreign policy, specifically the American right. You and I, we belong to a movement that sometimes is called the old right. And though we disagree with people like Pat Buchanan on economics and trade and immigration and things like that, the foreign policy specifically that's been advanced by Donald Trump and some of these, what you and I would call, unfortunately, progressive Republicans, has been one that is, I won't say non-interventionist, Judge, because due to their policies in regards to immigration, et cetera, and trade, they really are isolationists more than you and I being non-interventionists as such. Do you think that, I guess what I'm leading up to ask you, Judge, and we'll talk a little bit more about the history here and the philosophy is, do you think that the United States would be better off right now with Donald Trump's MAGA foreign policy, isolationist though it may be, than with Joe Biden's liberal internationalist foreign policy?
Well, you put me in a box. If you took Donald Trump and MAGA out of there, because I don't think it was a consistent foreign policy. I think it was a foreign policy based upon his daily impulses, how he felt each morning when he got up. I say that from having observed him up close and personal, and from my then perch at Fox, but we would be far better off with a non-interventionist. I don't want to say isolationist. You and I understand the difference, but the isolationists want to isolate us economically as well as militarily. I want to be able. I want you and your listeners to be able to buy whatever good or service they want from whoever makes it available to them, wherever that may be on the face of the earth, without the central planners in Washington having anything to do with it. That's the economic side. You can call that whatever you want. That's a fully integrated economic system. That may be fanciful to think that that would exist, but that's my goal. On foreign policy, the only moral war is a defensive one. Can you pull the trigger first? Yeah, when the other guy's ships are in your harbor or missiles are aimed at you and they're about to pull the trigger, you can pull the trigger first. It would be insane to wait for them to destroy a city before you could attack. But offensive wars, wars of opportunity, wars of empire, which the United States has waged consistently since the War of 1812, are fruitless, destructive, catastrophic, and have ruinous effects that sometimes are not apparent for many years. What are we doing in Ukraine? Helping Joe Biden run for re-election. What are we doing in the Middle East? Helping a group of Americans that are numerically deficient, but otherwise very, very influential in American society. I mean, last night, the White House floated the following: $100 billion to be split between Ukraine and Israel. I mean, that is just mind-boggling. We've given Ukraine a little over $100 billion already. We give Israel $4 billion a year. Another $46 billion to Israel would be more than it spends in a year on its national defense. Now, they either floated that because they expect it to be whittled down, or they floated it because Joe Biden wants to run for re-election as a wartime president, because his people believe that will take the voters' minds off his deplorable presidency and his personal inability to defend his presidency.
Judge, while the libertarians, I believe, have the morally superior and correct view when it comes to foreign policy, many people like Rand Paul and others frequently describe themselves as foreign policy realists. And as I understand it, that means that what they do is they have to propose, like Milton Friedman often did, policies that, while are not perfect, take us towards at least in the direction of a more libertarian worldview. And I wonder if, considering that the Republican Party seems to be oscillating between foreign policy neoconservatism, and please forgive me for speaking in painting with a broad brush here, Judge, but the neoconservatives have largely liberal views in regards, and when I say liberal, I mean good liberal, in regards to the economy, right, and international trade and immigration, right. Consider a Mitt Romney, for if you will. But of course, their views on when it comes to foreign policy are decidedly illiberal, perhaps, right? So in other words, we libertarians may say, well, we agree with Mitt Romney that international trade is a good thing, and we want to have, a safe and orderly immigration system, but we don't agree with the warmongering when it comes to Iran or Iraq or Afghanistan or Ukraine, if you will. On the other side, oscillating to the other side, Judge, are the let's say that if MAGA republicanism was not, led by Donald Trump, who was not the ideologue, let's say that, broadly speaking, that MAGA republicanism does have a more isolationist viewpoint, and they disagree with you and I on economics. They disagree with us on immigration. They disagree with us on foreign trade, but they agree with us on foreign policy, their America First foreign policy. So between these two extremes, of course, in the Republican Party sits we, the non-interventionists, we, the libertarians. But I guess if forced to look at this from a foreign policy realist view, Judge, are we better off with the free market economic warmongering neocons or the anti-free market socialistic economic views of the isolationists?
God, you're like asking me to pick my poison.
I know. Well, Judge, you're one of the Judge. You're one of maybe 100 people in the world who could understand that question and answer it.
You know, it ebbs and flows with the needs of society. It ebbs and flows with the threats to the nation, and it ebbs and flows with economic factors. The problem with addressing this is, governments do whatever they can get away with. And the central planning of the economy in the United States has prevented us from having a true picture of what a free market would actually look like. But the concept of feeding the military industrial complex in order to advance American empire, to me, is so horrific, so destructive, that I couldn't voluntarily countenance it under any circumstances, no matter the domestic benefits. It exists to destroy and kill. It has no regard for human life, doesn't believe in human life, therefore it doesn't believe in natural rights. So I suppose the neocons to us are more dangerous than the Buchananites.
Aren't these difficult problems, though, to rest with, Judge?
Well, they are. I mean, the goal is to to be with the neocons on domestic policy and the isolationists on foreign policy. It's a very difficult needle to thread. The goal is to have a person in the White House who thinks the way we do, which has never happened in your lifetime or mine. I mean, Donald Trump says he's America firster, and yet he'll send drones to kill people in foreign countries and give Israel everything it wants just because Israel is an exception. So it's hard to find the right human being. You know who was on my show yesterday? Talk about the right human being. Ron Paul. Man, he is just as sharp and articulate as ever on foreign policy and on economic policy. We found a clip of him on the floor of the House of Representatives blasting aid to Israel as an extension of American empire from 2011, and he's just as articulate today. But a human being like that in the White House, Austin, is really a pipe dream, given the state of American politics. We're going to end up with either an authoritarian a la Trump, DeSantis, Nikki Haley, or a wokester a la Biden, Gavin Newsom, Hillary Clinton, that type. The JFK, moderate, decent Republican, forget about it. The Ronald Reagan with libertarian instincts, forget about it. Those people are not in the running, as I see it, in this cycle.
It's a sad state of affairs. If you're just tuning into the Wake Up America show, good morning. I'm your host, Austin Peterson. Do me a favor and click that like button and subscribe to the channel that you're watching right now. Come back and join us every Monday through Friday from 7 a.m. to 9 a.m. Central Time. On Wednesdays, Judge Andrew Napolitano, who's joining us now, the host of the Judging Freedom podcast himself. He joins us every Wednesday at 8 a.m. Central Time for what we call big brain time. So please forgive us if some of these terms that you're hearing might be the first time that you're hearing, but this is a good chance, a good opportunity for you to get up close and personal with some of the more arcane ideas behind libertarian thought, specifically foreign policy. And that's what we're discussing right now with the backdrop of the conflict between Israel and Hamas. And Judge, sometimes I can't help but wonder, but everyone has a blind spot for themselves and their own people, right? I've been in the libertarian movement for 15 years. It's sometimes very difficult for me to be able to be objective about my people, my own views, and the people who share my ideology. So I'm reflexively defensive, of course, whenever we get criticism from neocons or leftists or liberals, right? It's kind of like, but then, of course, we're like a family in the sense that we can, I hope you don't mind if I use a curse word here, we can talk shit about each other, but we'll be damned if we're going to let anybody else talk shit about us to some extent, right?
Yeah.
But I mean, is there any blame that can be laid at the feet of the libertarian movement for the failures of ourselves to be able to advance our own ideas or ideology? Because it's easy to point a finger at the stupid American voter. It's easy to point a finger at the evil neocons or the progressive Republicans or what have you. But there are some very real inadequacies amongst our people in communicating these ideas to people in a way that actually makes them, and I'm guilty of this as well, being someone to vote for or support. There are some real inadequacies, are there not?
Well, yeah, there are. And because we are human beings with the clannish tendency, because human beings are at core social people. There are people that do everything alone, but they're really odd, and they don't move the dial. I mean, we all look for the right leadership. I think the libertarian movement in the United States was at its height when Ron Paul ran for president, because he was such an effective and uncompromising leader. And such a person has not come along since then. And I can't even think of anybody who effectively preceded him. I mean, Ronald Reagan, in my view, was a libertarian, but caved to the neocons and more traditional, muscular defense conservative Republicans with which he surrounded himself. Ron Paul never did that, and I don't believe would have done that had he ever been elected. But there is no Ron Paul today. I mean, you have a voice, I have a voice. There are many voices out there, but there is not one that dominates. Maybe because that one is not running for office. But when he ran for president, I don't even remember what year it was, whether it was, I guess it was 1980. At that point, maybe it was 84, maybe it was 88, whatever year it was. When did he run against McCain and Giuliani for the
2008.
2008. It's later than I thought. That was the height of the libertarian movement in the country and the height of the public's awareness of libertarian ideas and how amiable those ideas are to basic human nature, not corrupted human nature, which relies on the government to take care of it, but basic human nature, the chief and principal asset and essence of which is personal freedom. Nobody articulated those views in those days as effectively as Ron Paul does, and nobody really does that today. Try, though, you and I and our colleagues do. So I don't know where the libertarian movement is going to go. It's obviously in search of somebody who can articulate those views. You know, there's the Mises Institute, which concentrates on the economic side and the academic side. There's the Cato Institute, which does the same, far larger, far wealthier than Mises. And there are other small institutes. There are schools and colleges that teach all this, but the mainstream ignores it. I mean, I don't think Princeton University has a chair in libertarian studies. And if they did, it would be occupied by somebody who didn't believe in libertarian studies, was just there to collect the cash and explain something in a way so as to be critical of it. The law schools are totally dominated by the hard left. The only place that natural law is taught are some Catholic law schools and non-Catholic law schools when I was on the faculty. You know, the law is like like a novel where everybody writes a new chapter based on the preceding chapters. Judges get to expand things, but they have to basically follow precedent. So the law is very, very slow, and it follows cultural and societal trends. It doesn't lead them. I don't know if I'm making sense, but somebody like a Ron Paul would lead and articulate the views in a way that young people and old people and people in between and truck drivers and academics could understand and accept.
It is an irony that such staunch individualists nearly require a leader in order for us to be able to be organized. It is
an irony, but it would be a voluntary embracing of leadership rather than a symbiotic relationship of, oh, the government gives me welfare, therefore I will vote for it.
Judge, I'd like to, speaking of big brain stuff, we're going to really get into big brain stuff here. I have been reading Ayn Rand lately and listening to many of her interviews.
You can see the smile on my face.
Well,
not on foreign policy. Not on foreign policy.
And so that's why I think you're going to perhaps you won't be smiling soon in her views and of the conflict between Israel and the Palestinians. And I'm in such a state of conflict right now, Judge, because one of the stories that I've been reading lately has been about the conquistadors of the Aztecs and the Mayan conflicts between Hernan de Cortez and the conquistadors and the Aztecs and the Mayans. And the way that Ayn Rand framed the debate between Israel and the Palestinians was comparative to, and I know we briefly touched on this before, but I'd like to get a little bit deeper on this while we have time, Judge, about this concept of cultural superiority. I don't think that all cultures are equal, Judge. I may see us as equal before the law, but I think that, while I'm not a Catholic, I think that the enlightened Catholicism that conquered the Aztecs and the Mayans ended human sacrifice and brought with it a level of civilization that was a step closer, although not libertarian, a step closer towards libertarian ideals. Ayn Rand very much frames this conflict between Israel and the Palestinians in similar terms. So I don't think that there's not a strong argument in my mind that disagrees with the concept that the Americans should not have spread west, or that that Jefferson's Empire of Liberty here in the United States should not have been brought and maintained, that if one is a conquering nation that brings liberal or libertarian values, that those ends don't justify those means to some certain extent. And you've agreed with me about that concept in certain limited ways. But I wonder how you think about that in terms of the conflict, such as the conflict between Israel and the Palestinians. Is it comparable, would you say, Hernan de Cortez and the Aztecs and the Americans and the Native Americans? Is there a comparison there? Does she have a point?
I don't think she has a point. I don't think they're comparable. I do agree with you that certain societies are morally superior to others because they recognize the natural rights of human beings, to the extent that the indigenous peoples in the New World believed in human sacrifice. That's obviously repellent. But to the extent that some of them were burned at the stake because they wouldn't profess Christianity is even more repellent. There is no definite answer to this. I mean, I love Jefferson, as you know, but this was more about cash than it was about freedom. Obtaining the Louisiana Purchase from a nearly bankrupt Napoleon. I often wonder how they got Napoleon $15 million. Did they ship gold bars across the Atlantic? I don't know how they did it. I'm sure there's a simple answer there. But the way to enhance a society is not by murdering its leaders. It's by a gradual exposition of the values. I mean, again, we turn to Catholicism, And even though the Pope is a Jesuit, and I pray that he goes to heaven tonight, the Jesuits in North America did far more to uplift the indigenous peoples than Columbus or Cortez did. Now, they might not have been able to spread the concept of an immortal soul and every soul is a potentially infinite value had they not been preceded by Columbus and Cortez. But what they did without violence, without authority, without compulsion, and at great personal risk to themselves, many of whom suffered horrifically for it. I don't know if I've answered your question.
No,
I love
it's the
Ayn
things that-
Rand on the value of the individual as greater than the state, and I love Ayn Rand on the free market. But she would just as soon obliterate the Palestinians as convert them.
I think that it's the things that you're not saying that are really saying the most to me, Judge, because sometimes I feel quite alone in my conflict when I consider these things, because the more you have, the more your knowledge of history becomes, gets filled in, the more you realize what a fresh anomaly in historic terms libertarianism is. When I debate leftists or socialists or right wing Republicans, frequently they will say, "When has a libertarian society ever existed?" And that is a very deep and serious question, and that is a real challenge to our ideas. Is to say, well, real libertarianism has never been tried. Well, then we sound like communists and socialists who say real communism has never been tried, and we find ourselves in a bit of a paradox. And so therefore I have to look at perhaps examples of the hoplite farmers of Greece who were not taxed and who defended their own property at that time. But of course, that was not a perfect libertarian society. And, there is, of course, no perfect libertarian society. Even if you look at, Icelandic Godord, the ancient Vikings who, voluntarily chose a leader rather than having it imposed upon them, or even Somaliland. In Somaliland, in ancient Zir, they had a system of property rights, for example. But then I consider the most modern example of the closest that we've had to anything resembling a libertarian society. And the only example that I can think of, Judge, is the United States.
Well, there's nothing libertarian about the United States. The United States, all the government in the United States is like all other government based on theft. I mean, Switzerland might be a better example because everybody votes on everything. There still is governmental theft, but it's bottom up rather than top down, and you're not taxed if you leave. By the way, if I sold my farm and moved to Florida, the state of New Jersey would make me pay an exit tax because it can. Because government will take any opportunity it can to steal from people. There has never been a truly perfect libertarian society because people are seduced by giveaways, which is what governments promise. Take from the haves and give to the have-nots.
So it's a difficult.
And as long as people are susceptible to that seduction, they will choose goodies and safety over personal liberty and privacy.
One last hypothetical for you, Judge, and then I'd like to have you preview your column and your upcoming show, Judging Freedom. But this was posed to me several years ago, and it got me wondering about the question about big government and a preferred society to live in on this topic. But, if one had to choose between two different planets to live on, and you had one that was confederated republics, but they're all governed like North Korea. In other words, you had multiple smaller governments that were smaller in size, smaller in finances, smaller in nearly every way, but they govern their citizens in those smaller republics like they're governed in North Korea. Or you were to live on a planet that had one world government, but it was governed under a constitutional system similar to the United States, but the government was massive, had a massive military, but again, governed like the United States, one had to choose between having a confederated republics governed like North Korea versus a planet where you were governed like the United States, I think I would choose the United States every time. So that really leads me to the question of, is it the size of the government that matters, or is it how that government protects individual rights that truly matters the most?
It's the latter. Unquestionably, it's the latter. People who argue for democracy think it just means, or a variant of democracy, think it just means majority rule. No, it means respect for individual rights. The tyranny of the majority can be worse than the tyranny of a madman. A madman sleeps, the majority never sleeps. The majority has an aura of respectability because it is the majority. So in your Hobson's choice, reluctantly, I would make the same choice. I mean, that government, I'll go back to Thomas Jefferson, that government is best which governs least. Had I been with him, I would have whispered in his ear, Thomas, that government is better which governs not at all. I think he might have believed that. He didn't show it in his years in the White House, but he made those arguments before entering and after leaving the White House. You talk about, forgive me for turning around, I have the book here somewhere. You talk about the Aztecs. This is a debate that went on for, I don't know if you can see this.
Lift it up for us.
3 days. 3 days before the King of Spain about whether the indigenous peoples in the New World had human rights or whether they were subhuman animals. The King of Spain, after hemming and hawing and hemming and hawing and hemming and hawing, agreed that they did have human rights and that should infuse the beneficent administration of their governmental needs. Of course, after they had been captured and after their leaders had been killed. De las Casas was a Jesuit who argued in favor of human rights, became a bishop, and never was canonized, but is a great figure in Catholic history. But these debates are fascinating to read, and that they could have debated this 18 hours a day for 3 days before the king finally made up his mind. There was a similar debate in Parliament once. Is the king above the Parliament, or is Parliament above the king? And that debate went on for 3 days, and Parliament voted with a 5-vote majority. The Parliament was above the king. And then a couple of years later, somebody checked the ballots, and it turned out that the parliamentarians had cheated, and the king actually won the vote.
Judge, give us a preview of your column this week, as well as your show, Judging Freedom, will you?
Well, my Judging Freedom show this week had Scott Ritter on yesterday, and the title of the show is Why I No Longer Stand With Israel. It's got about 155,000 hits already. It's dynamic. We taped it yesterday, and it's posted. We taped Ron Paul yesterday on the dangers of American empire building. Today, I have 2 retired anti-war, pro-peace lieutenant colonels, Tony Schaefer and Karen Kwiatkowski. Each of whom will explain how the American military task in Israel is impossible to achieve, how the Israeli military task in Gaza is impossible to achieve. My column this week looks at when all else fails, they take you to war, the dangers of American allegiance to the government of Prime Minister Netanyahu. But hey, Austin, who founded Hamas? Hint, I just used his name. Benjamin Netanyahu. As an effort to disrupt the Palestinian Liberation Organization and provide them with resistance. Who funded Hamas? The Israeli Knesset. You won't hear that anywhere except on my podcast.
Judge Andrew Napolitano, his weekly column is at judgenap.com, and his show, Judging Freedom, a runaway hit, can be downloaded on any of your mobile devices. Judge, I don't have these conversations with anyone else at this level. You are one of the only people that has this depth of knowledge that I can go over these things with, and I am so grateful for your regular
And
weekly
you are
appearances
one
so
of
we
the
can talk
only
about this.
people that I would let AMA ask me anything.
We'll see you next week, Judge. Thank you.
Thank you, Austin. All the best, my friend.
Thank you. Don't forget to visit judgenap.com again and download his weekly his podcast, Judging Freedom, as well. All right. What did you think about that? Whew. Well, your cigarette after questions like that. We call that big brain time for a reason here on the Wake Up America show, because we put on our thinking hats. And, you know, I know for a lot of people, it isn't like the kind of topics that you typically tune into morning shows for. So we are going to lighten the topics up and start to go over to something a little bit different now. However, I just want you to know that if you do love those things and you do love those kinds of conversations, they're only happening here on the Wake Up America show. So just do us a little favor and click like and subscribe to the channel. And that way you let us know that you'd like to have more conversations like that. If you come back and join us every Wednesday, Judge Andrew Napolitano and I have those kinds of conversations, and you hear things that you don't hear anywhere else. So help to support the channel by clicking like and subscribe. See that little foosh? There we go. Click that subscribe button. We'd be glad to have you come back every Monday through Friday from 7 a.m. to 9 a.m. Central Time. Very briefly, if you haven't already, don't forget to check out our delicious coffee, ap4libertyshop.com. Our Founding Flavors coffee is exclusive to the AP for Liberty shop. My favorite, Thomas's Painkiller, is so ding-dang good that I wish I had a freaking barrel of it. I'm actually looking at trying to get 5-pound bags of it for sale, but we haven't gotten there yet. So for now, if you love coffee, that's what this is. This is a coffee for coffee lovers. If you're like a, you know, Folgers person, you drink a day-old coffee from your mug you left in the car person, and you don't really care where your coffee comes from, I understand. This is probably not for you. I can't compete with Folgers. I can't compete with the $5 a bag coffees at the stores. The only way that a small business like myself, like a 2-person business, can compete is to find really good coffee that you can't get anywhere else and sell it for just a hair under what premium coffee sellers do. And I'm kind of breaking the fourth wall by explaining this, because some people might care, some people might not, but that's really the only way, like economically, for a person like myself to be able to compete in the market, is to get a really premium blend and then sell it for just a little bit less than other premium coffee blends are offered at. Because if you compare us to other premium coffees online, go ahead, give us a comparison. Go find a 12-ounce bag of Black Rifle coffee or whoever else, and then see how much it costs with shipping. Because remember, shipping is going to be the key. We're just a hair under our competitors in the premium coffee space. Have you tried Founding Flavors coffee? Try a bag. My recommendation, grab a bag of Thomas's Painkiller coffee. It's that Colombian single origin coffee that is friggin' delicious. Look at the reviews. If you don't, obviously I'm a shill for my own brand. Read the reviews online. People don't have to write reviews, okay? And it's not like I don't really have an army of followers or anything like that. I'm not like some Charlie Kirk character, and I don't have giant boobies to sell products or anything like that. The only way that I can actually be successful, somebody like myself, like an Uggo dude, like a solid 6 or a 7 on a good day, like can actually sell products and like have an audience, is I gotta be damn good, baby. I gotta bring you the best shit, because I don't have a rich daddy and mama helping me out. I don't have connections to like Donald Trump. I wasn't a MAGA Republican, right? I don't have big corporate sponsors that are, pouring thousands and thousands of dollars in. The only way I can compete is to bring you the absolute best show, the best guests, the best content, give you the best performance. Am I entertaining you right now? Are you not entertained, right? Like, you have no idea how many plates I'm spinning right now to keep this show on the go. I wish I could show you how many effing buttons there are. Okay, Austin, shut up about the show. Drink the coffee, it'll make you feel better. ap4libertyshop.com. If you haven't bought a bag, get yourself one today. If you buy more than one bag, make sure you go to the bundles page. You're going to get savings, right? And if you've already tried the coffee and you already love it, now's the time to sign up for a monthly subscription, or 2 weeks, as Will Run Riot has said. Sign up for the subscription because it helps to support the show. You're helping to support the ideas of economic freedom and personal liberty, and you know for sure you're getting exclusive, delicious, premium coffee, and the money that you spend will be used to support freedom. What do you say? Okay. Maybe we'll lay by the bay. Eat some hay? I just may. Listen, or you'll pay. All right, Shooter McGavin. All right. I would take a break right now, but honestly, I've got lots of great, exciting news and things to talk about. I'd love to hear your thoughts today. You can send us a text at 573-319-1586. Let's see, I might be able to show you all the buttons. Hold on, let me pull this up here. Let's see if I can actually show you all the buttons. You know what? I'm going to do a little behind the scenes here. You guys want to let's take a little 1-minute break, and I'm going to actually just kind of show you all this insane setup. This is going to be kind of messy and weird, okay? So, and you won't be able to hear me necessarily. I might be yelling at the microphone. But let me show you. I'm going to show you kind of like what this setup is. Give me a brief second, behind the scenes tour. Let me show you what the hell goes on over here, okay? All right, here we go. All right, check this out here. You can see that over there. Look at that. So, show you this. All right, here we go. This is all live. This is going to be really messy. Here you go. Here we go. I'm going to pull over the microphone so you can kind of hear me here to an extent. But here we have, look at this. All right, so this is the Rodecaster Pro 2, right? This is my audio solution, and God, is it a bitch trying to figure out how to do this thing because it's so complicated, right? I got all my faders, right? Microphone levels and different things. I have my guests feeding in, right? I've got my my headphone levels, my guest headphone levels when I have them in, right? Right, there's my USB coming in and all things. Here's my switcher. Now check this out, right? This right here, this is controlling all of this button's right here controlling my cameras, right? So I've got this camera and this camera. I'm only operating off of 2 cameras right now, but sometimes I have as many as 3 or 4 if I have a guest in studio. Then you've got, look at this. So this right here, this multi-button thing right here, this is the Stream Deck, right? And it's got all the little things. Let me show you the bells and whistles here. Keep moving here. Hopefully I'm not going to like kill the camera as we're moving in. Right, but I'm switching between my scenes here, right? Take a look at this, right? I've got my little animated gif so I know what music to hit at what time. Like, see the little gold coin there that's spinning up on the screen? Let's see if I can get my finger in here and point at it right up here. You won't be able to tell because my fat finger. That spinning gold coin up there, that's like for the gold scene, right? When I'm selling Lear Capital's gold, check them out at learaustin.com. I've got SpongeBob SquarePants GIFs for when people are screaming, Happy Gilmore going boo, right? Michael Scott from The Office, right? And all these things help me to run the show, essentially, right? Then there's my phone where I'm reading your comments and keeping them live. There's the chicken. And then, of course, I've got everything. This is the actual show that I'm trying to not look at. Right, I'm trying not to look at this show, right? Because I'm trying to look at the camera, right? But this is managing the entire show. I've got 2 different scenes. I've got dozens and dozens of elements in there that I'm trying to maintain and manage to ensure that you, like when I'm playing AOC's clip, right? And there's no, look at all my staff. See my crew here? Check out, and isn't it nice? Look at the crew. Here's the lights, right? This is the studio, right? There's another little mini studio in here where Scott does his show. Right, but look at the staff. See everybody help us say hello to the crew of the Wake Up America show. Let's give them applause. Let's tell you what. Let's give the crew an applause. Why don't we here, right there? Check that out. Nice, thank you. Yeah, give the crew a hand. Here they are, the crew. Oh, it's me. It's just me. I'm the crew. Right, that's it. So. And there's my other camera over there pointed at me, right? So that's it. So that's the Wake Up America show crew. And that's how this thing gets run. Basically, I'm like a monkey pushing buttons. And that's how this show gets run and every single day. It's just me here on the Wake Up America show. So, your support would be appreciated. Buy some coffee, make a Rumble rant or some other donation. So anyways, you can text the show today at 573-319-1586. Again, you can text the show at 573-319-1586. I am going to go take a brief little commercial break, guys. I am kind of exhausted. I just need to go catch my breath, use the bathroom really quick. When I get back, Generation Z doesn't have friends and none on the run. Dude, this nurse body checked this environmental activist. I've got so much good stuff. I got more content than I could do for the end of the show. Send a Rumble rant, become a monthly subscriber to the show, buy a bag of coffee while we're on commercial break on the Wake Up America show at wakeupAmericaShow.com.
Want an engaging website to boost your business? You're just a click away from 5-star Fiverr talent. Hundreds of freelancer skills like web design. Head to Fiverr.com today and get something started.
American conservatism is distinct, like America is distinct from the United Kingdom. American conservatism's roots comes out of the Wild West, out of pioneerism. The difference between American conservatives and European conservatives is that Americans are cowboys. We are that God, guns, gold, and girls. It's wild here, and we should stay that way. We shouldn't allow a European version of conservatism to come and infect us here. We like it wide open spaces here, you know, deep in the heart of Texas and all that.
Hey there, it's your favorite Vice President Joe Biden. I wanted to talk to you today about the Wake Up America show, the best source for all your political news and commentary. But before I get started, let me just make sure I have all my notes in order. Okay, where was I? All right, the Wake Up America show. It's a great way to stay informed and make your voice heard. Boy, what was I saying again? Oh, right. The Wake Up America show. It's important that we all stay engaged and knowledgeable about what's going on in our country and, the thing. But hold on, where was I going with all this? Oh, yeah. The Wake Up America show. It's a fantastic resource. And if you really want to make a difference, man, you can sign up to be a monthly donor at wakeupAmericaShow.com/support. Now, where was I? Oh, that's right, the Wake Up America show. So if you want to stay woke and support a great cause, head on over to wakeupAmericaShow.com/support and sign up to be a monthly donor today. And if you're feeling generous, you can even give a donation in my name. Thanks for listening, and keep on keeping on, America. Come on, man.
George. Thank you for watching the Wake Up America show with my dad. Today, I'd like to share with you 3 reasons why you should visit Dad's online store at apforlibertyshop.com. Number 1, you can get exclusive freedom-loving merch designed by AP himself or me mum, Steffi. Liberty Laura has made some designs as well, and blimey, they are great. Number 2, most of these products are so wicked that they aren't even allowed to be advertised on Facebook or Instagram. Modern machine guns and a proper keychain. Plus, our Grover Cleveland t-shirt is so spicy apparently that leftists on Facebook specifically banned it from appearing on the website. Number 3, you're supporting liberty lovers just like you. Spend your money where you earn it, and you help me Pops build a community that supports what you believe. Bloody hell, this commercial is running too long. Gotta run. Bye now. Don't forget to visit apforlibertyshop.com. That's apforlibertyshop.com.
Good morning. Rise and freedom. I'm Austin Peterson. You're watching and listening to the Wake Up America show at wakeupAmericaShow.com. We're glad and thankful to have you here. Today's October the 18th, 2023. Click that like button and subscribe to the channel, and come back and join us every Monday through Friday from 7 a.m. to 9 a.m. Central Time. We'd be glad and grateful to have you here. Oh, wow. You guys are killing it over there. I made an offer because I've got like 4 or 5 more stories that I haven't gotten to and some funny clips that I want to play. And if we don't honestly hit this goal, you guys might miss the nun. But I've promised, and I don't do this very often, but every once in a while I'll offer to the audience, if they want me to go a little bit extra over time, then we'll try and meet a donation goal. And I said, if we can get $50 raised in rants by 9 a.m., so 10 minutes from now, then I'll do an extra 30 minutes. You guys want to see the nun body checking the environmental activist, don't you? We got to raise $20 more, and I'll go 30 more minutes. Make the monkey dance. Entertain me, says Clementine. Very funny. Happy birthday, David Lee, 180. Thanks so much for that, brother. We appreciate you letting us know. We like to talk to our audience. We like to make friends with you guys, and we like to support you all as well out there. So happy birthday, David. I'm sure 21 looks good on you, baby. Beautiful, beautiful. Happy big birthday. Let's give it up for David Lee, 180. 250 people watching us live this morning, 256. Do us a favor. Half of you can click that like button, don't you think, or subscribe to the channel. We love growing here at rumble.com. They've been very supportive of our message of economic freedom and personal liberty and helping us to spread the word, and people like yourself are doing it as well. All right, so I'll keep an eye on the chat the best I can, but send me a text, by the way, if we do hit that goal and I don't see it, because we do have less than 10 minutes to try and hit that $50 goal. We got to raise $20 more, and I'll go an extra 30 minutes. But if we do hit it, then we will continue on an extra 30 minutes. Okay, so girl measuring. Have you heard of this? This is a new trend, girl measuring, right? This is girl measuring, essentially, is a new trend taking over on TikTok. First, it was girl dinner, then it was girl math. But the latest trend in girlhood is more in line with girl hammers. Welcome to girl measuring. Girl measuring is essentially a term being used to describe people using their arms and hands to gauge things like room dimensions, wall lengths, or pieces of furniture. No, I'm not kidding. That is a real thing.
Ain't it fun?
What the hell?
Do that at the same time it's risky. Having dreamed that they coming and get me. Walking that bitch get critical. Dance.
Have you ever done this? Girl measuring? Okay, this is how big this space is, right? Here it is, girl measuring. You've heard of girl math. There it was. Well, I guess in that situation, it actually worked out. There it is, girl measuring. Ladies, what do you have to say for yourselves? Send us a text at 573-319-1586. One girl says that girl math is fun, but don't forget about girl measuring. The clip of her, quote, mathematically unstoppable method of using her fingers to pinpoint the middle of the wall that she wants to hang a frame on went viral. She says, when I actually use measuring tapes and levels, it's wrong. Girl math never done me dirty, LOL. Okay. Oh, we did it. Oh, hey, Andy Opperman. Thank you, Andy. Appreciate that. Looks like we're going to go a little bit overtime today. Oh, the number 6. Thank you. Appreciate you, brother. God bless you. God bless you. God bless us each and every one. If you're watching us over on some of the other apps, I am going to cut off the stream, and we are going to go exclusively to rumble.com as a gift to Rumble, who has been supportive of us. So overtime today, if you want to view the show, if you're watching us this morning, like there's usually like a dozen people or so watching us on YouTube. Sometimes people are watching us on the Freedom Hub app, for example, on Fire TV, Roku, or what have you. Sometimes people watching us on Facebook. FYI, if you want to see overtime, it's got to be over at rumble.com/AP for Liberty. So about 6 minutes from now, I'm going to cut the feed over on the other channels, and you'll only be able to watch overtime at rumble.com. Now, I know my buddy Andy gets upset about that when I do that, because he's like, oh, I can't watch the Rumble app or stuff like that. But I do think it's important for me to show some loyalty to Rumble, who has been so wonderful in supporting our show and putting us on the front page. So I'm going to give the overtime today to rumble.com, and we're grateful for that. So thank you to rumble.com especially for featuring us on the front page today. We are up there as the editor's picks. So thank you very much for all of our Rumble friends over there for doing us that big favor. You can text the show again at 573-319-1586. One listener did text in earlier and says, based Judge Knapp knows the acronym AMA. Yes. I did like that, actually, that the judge actually knows what AMA, Ask Me Anything, means. And of course, you can ask me anything as well when you send us a text at that text line at 573-319-1586. The text lines are opening. So girl math, girl measuring. One girl writes in, says, I do this. Meanwhile, my husband gets a measuring tape and a level, and it still looks wrong to me. Another one says, I used to be a visual merchandiser, and this is how I hung all the artwork at the showroom where I worked. The post, of course, started a big conversation online about this subject. One showed a woman, of course, using her arms to determine the length of a wall. She says this is the only way that she measures anything, right? She says 60% of the time, it works every time. But I really swear I can do stuff by eye better than measuring properly. She says, while girl measuring seems to work for many, experts say there are better alternatives. Using your hands or arms can offer a quick and convenient way to gauge the size of something, but it's important to recognize it will only provide a very rough estimate of measurement that is not very reliable, says Nash from magnet.com. The method falls short when accuracy is essential and could lead to subpar room aesthetics and unnecessary expenditure of time and money. What else can you say about this? I mean, it's retarded, for the love of God. It's just retarded. If it works for you, fine. And ladies, please, I got to hear some explanations for this. Can we not learn how to measure? We need shop class in school. Sorry to sound like an old fogey boomer conservative here, but it's time for us to get shop class back in school. Can I get an amen? Okay, I'm not going to lie. My dad had to actually bring the measured cut boards for our above ground garden in our backyard. So... Yeah, so Austin, maybe take a page out of your own playbook. I'm not gonna lie, actually, I've done this girl measuring before. Austin, you're such a bull. I know. Let's get down to business to defeat the Hun. Time is racing toward us. And we'll sometime. Anyways, be a man. You must be swift as a coursing river. Be a man. You can't use girl measuring. Be a man with all the strength of a hammer and nail. Mysterious as the dark side of the studio. Be a man. Does everybody know the backup songs for this one? Okay, Austin, shut up. Stop singing. Like all the force of a great typhoon, be a man. Isn't this what you guys paid extra good money for me to go overtime today? We're going overtime. Thanks, Kermode Bear, for tweeting that. He says, we have too many stories to fit in the normal 2-hour window, so we're going overtime on Rumble. Yes, we are. And since we're at the end of our normal time, I'm going to go ahead and cut us off on Facebook. Come and visit us over at rumble.com/AP4Liberty. That's AP, the number 4, AP4Liberty. Say